and welcome in everybody to another episode of the Brett Allen Show. Today we are chatting with the multi-talented actor Rick Cosnett. If you've seen the Vampire Diaries, if you've seen Quantico, if you've seen The Flash, then you know who our guest is. And if you don't, you're going to get to know him. He's just a very fascinating individual, and he's had a really good career. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks, Brett. It's good to be here. What an introduction.
Well, it's all very true. And I mean that because you have just been a part of some really cool projects, going all the way back to the beginning, as they say. But I'm very interested, and I like to ask this question of people right out of the gate is what sort of interested you in becoming an actor or becoming a storyteller? Where did that process or journey begin for you, Rick?
Yeah, but again, very young for me. My parents used to do theater in Kigoma, which is a town next to the town where I grew up, which is Chigutu in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And I was just looking actually at someone's pictures because they went back there recently, and it really took me back. But I think just as a child, I could have really grown up anywhere. But I was lucky enough to grow up there, and I always wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to tell stories. I always wanted to show people how it felt, the things that I experienced and smelt and touched and felt. I wanted people to feel that, I wanted to be a part of these shows. They used to be variety shows and Gilbert and Sullivan's with costumes and lights and, at the Campbell Theatre. And yeah, so I was probably about 3 years old, and I was always entertaining my family, putting on shows of Mrs. Tiggywinkle from Beatrix Potter, for example, was probably my earliest work on the veranda. So yeah, always dancing and singing, and just, it was kind of like probably quite obvious if you saw this little creature that I was. Yeah.
I love it. Is there footage out there of this? That's going to be the next question I think people are going to
Well, that's
have.
true. A long, long time ago, so there's a lot less, evidence. Although I shouldn't say that really, now that I catch myself, because growing up as well, in the 80s in Zimbabwe, it was very strange to be a very feminine young boy. And so I think I always think, oh God, when I used to see home videos of myself, I used to think, oh my God, is that really me? I mean, everyone does that anyway, but it was more because I was called a girl at school and all that stuff. And so, I kind of wish there was. Now it would be hard to watch.
I don't know. Maybe it's
yeah,
for the best that it's buried.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said it's maybe best that it's buried, right? I don't know. I watch old home movies of myself growing up, in the 80s and doing performances and things and all of that, and sort of going, it makes sense, why I do what I do now. I would go around and interview family members and just put on performances. I think my brother and I did puppet shows to like Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 and just,
oh my God, that's amazing. We would have been great friends.
yeah, I think we would have. Yeah. And going through similar things throughout middle school and high school. And, it's kind of interesting though, how those things shape us and make us who we are as individuals, and probably even to the point where it informs you just as an actor and as a storyteller, and maybe, a lot of those things. So I've been a big fan for years of just learning to embrace that stuff. And again, for me, there's no incriminating footage of all of this. I think it's all on 8mm film somewhere. I don't know where. It's probably for the best that it's not out there. So what was the conversation like with family when you decided or were old enough to sort of make the leap? Did you come to the States with your family? Was it early on, or was it because you wanted to be an actor, or was there other things that brought you here and sort of opened the door to becoming an actor?
We actually immigrated to Australia in 2000 as a family. and I was 16, and I went to finish school there, went to drama school in Australia, and lived there for 6 years in Sydney. And it was really, I was really trying to get to New York or London, really, being a young blonde ambition, being someone full of that, I think. But I never really thought I'd end up in Los Angeles, but that's where I ended up because I met this teacher in Sydney who's from LA and an acting teacher and a life coach, and he really helped me prepare myself mentally, I think, for what's required. What was required of me to get over
Sure.
my own limitations that I was putting on myself, and that was really helpful and amazing. And it really was the catalyst for me moving to LA, and then I was here for a few years before I got my first big role, which was on the Vampire
Okay,
Diaries.
that was my next question. So that was
Yeah,
really like, did you do commercials and things like that prior, or were
yeah,
you just going out and auditioning and then the
a
Vampire
lot of
Diaries hit?
auditioning, a lot of I did a pilot that didn't get picked up. A sitcom pilot was so much fun. And my first job I think was an Acura car commercial, and I had an accident on the 101 on the way to the lot.
How ironic.
Yeah, and they were not very forgiving when I arrived late either.
Usually they're not. No.
Uh, yeah, and also I was funny because I was going to do the commercial and I was driving the car in the commercial, and I was like, wow, they didn't even ask me for my driver's license. And I also just had an accident on the way here. And then I was doing these kind of crazy driving through the New York streets at Warner Brothers. Um, Little did they know that, I can't, I'm not really I always have to drive a car or throw things because I can act like I can very well. Whereas in reality, it's really not my cup of tea. I pulled it off.
Yeah, it
And
worked out
managed.
well.
But yeah, and then I got very close to things. I almost got a part on, the originals and all these other shows that didn't go, and then nearly got a part on Days of Our Lives for 5 years. Very upset about that, and then I got the part of the Vampire Diaries a few weeks later. So I think I was just very lucky as well that I got on a show that was already so popular, and that was like looking back, like such an anomaly, really. Yeah.
It really was. And I remember, going to Comic Cons during that time when that show was popular, meeting different cast members, Ian and Daniel and all these different people that
Mm-hmm.
were on this show. But really, like, there's a lot of good television out there at that time. But that show in particular was part of like this time capsule where it was kind of a different show, which I'm surprised, honestly. That's not one that uh, you know, a Netflix or an HBO or a Hulu has tried to pick and sort of revamp it a little bit because it was that
Yeah.
popular, and it was just kind of different than what people were used to.
It is. It's crazy. I mean, I just went to a big Vampire Diaries convention last weekend,
Oh,
and
I bet fans go crazy when they see you guys.
crazy. Some people had my outfits from the show that they bought
I'm
on
sure.
auction and had me signed. Um, and it was yeah, it's crazy. Like it lives on and on and on. And they've got like a big tour, Vampire Diaries convention tour happening like this year and next year. And yeah, it's very cool. Like how the longevity of it is amazing. Yeah, and people just embraced me even before I'd been on the show, which I think was also a very good lesson for me when it came to fame or whatever you want to call it. Um, in terms of just having people recognize and acknowledge you, like uh, people hadn't even seen they hadn't even seen me act yet, and on Twitter, and they were just saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." It was been announced that I was on the show, which I thought was really sweet, and I was like, "Hang on." like how do you love me? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like they were just so kind of like willing to kind of give me the benefit of the doubt, which is kind
Yeah. Well, when you're dealing in that tween demographic, you
of
know,
right.
like
It's more of a projection.
it's a projection regardless, you know what I mean? And even still, like getting introduced to fame or whatever you want to call it, public recognition is kind of like, that's kind of a big deal. And then when you go on a show like that and then you continue to have success, that's a testament of your abilities and likability and all the bajillion things that go into being an actor, because this world that you live in, it can be very unforgiving. So you get the Vampire Diaries that's very successful. Sadly, a lot of people were like, the show ends. There were copycats of that show that people tried to do that just didn't really like launch. um and then you move on and you get Quantico, and then of course the Flash. You've had very massive highlights in your career. So when you go from one of these shows to another and you're on them for a long period of time, let's kind of wind back to the Vampire Diaries, and now you're going out to find work again. Was it hard to sort of break out of that mold of what people saw you as far as like, being these types of characters, or was it quite easy to kind of shed that and just go out and continue to audition?
Yeah, well, I think, it was my third audition after I died on the Vampire Diaries was for The Flash, and everything was in alignment in terms of the fact that I'd auditioned for this casting director 1,000 times, and it was also the CW again. So I knew I kind of had a chance, and so I put my heart and soul into it, so much so that I was, after the first audition, so shell shocked that it was over that I just burst into tears driving home because I was so unsure about what they thought. But in hindsight, it was great. But I'm the worst judge sometimes of my. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Sure.
So to answer your question, which I completely forgot because this
Well,
is
I mean,
so.
just you basically did. You're fine. Yeah, just kind of
Oh
like
yeah,
being very fortunate to
yeah.
get the
So then
Flash.
I was gonna say sorry. Yeah. So it was actually the producers and the casting director who were really instrumental in actually creating a different character for me, because at first I was playing Eddie, my character on the Flash. In the audition, it was really easy. I just loved him so much, but it was really easy to make him a bit of an asshole. And obviously, my character on the Vampire Diaries was a diabolical asshole.
That's an
So
understatement, but yeah.
they said, they said, lean in, lean in. The customer was actually coming out of the bathroom just before one of the final tests. And he's like, okay, they really want you to just be as nice as possible. Like just as, and I was like, I can do that. I can totally do that. So, we made Eddie so irritatingly awesome and so likable and lovely and sweet. And it really brought out the best in me. And I wish I was that person. I try to be. I think Eddie is so rises above everything. And he is like, we have a family friend who's exactly like him. I kind of based him on a little bit.
That's
He's
great.
just like really popular at school, just good at sports, able, and always there to help. We'll build a deck and like renovate a house on his hands and then go to work. And Eddie's that person. Eddie's that cop. Eddie's that detective who's just absolutely solid. Like just a very even keeled, awesome, fun, funny person. Um, so yeah, that's not me, but I think it's a part of me.
Sure.
Try to lean into it as much as I can.
And it's great they continue to bring the character back. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's one
Yeah,
of the things that's so fascinating about that show is, even if they bring somebody back as a different type of character, but we go, oh, I've seen that person before. But it's great because it's fun because fans become, connected to you. Unless it's like Vampire Diaries where you get killed off. And even then, they would still bring people back and be like, you know,
totally.
how does this work? There was another show around that time, The Secret Circle. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was
I remember that.
very
Yeah,
similar. I think it was more witches than vampires, but it was clearly an attempt to copycat what you guys had done. I think it was on like one of the competitive networks.
Right.
But it's great. I mean, you've just had a really good career. And now sort of because of where you're at now and people know who you are and family, what do parents, family think about what you're doing? Are they like, wow, he actually did it? You know what I'm saying? Like he made it and is successful and byproduct being on television.
Yeah, totally. They're absolutely thrilled and so incredibly supportive. Like, and I'm so touched by it as well. You know, like my dad, you know, has collected things like of me, you know, for so long now, um, which is so cool. And like, you know, especially when you know, they're retired now, but like, you know, when he used to work, he would go out like Western Australia to work, um, and he would have some clients just kind of freak out or want a picture for their daughter or son, or you know, and that to me was like so special. In order also because you know they've been through obviously like any parent all the hard times with me and also the times of like oh my god please don't be an actor please be a lawyer you know and I was so adamant and there were some times there where it was like oh gosh you know and you know back in the day you know they'd really supported me and so I think yeah for them especially I think it's been a huge win yeah
100%. Well, just that's how I define success. You know what I mean? Doing the things that you love. If you're getting paid for it, that's even better. But really just creating a life. One last question. I see a piano behind you. Do you
yeah
do you play often? Do you practice all or is it just is that for decoration?
Yeah, I do actually. I played
Okay.
since I was 7 years old,
I knew you had
and
played. I just wasn't sure if you still played or not, but that's very cool.
yeah. So luckily, I thanks to my parents as well, and some amazing teachers along the way. I pushed all the way through to when I was 17. I did my grade 8, which is in Zimbabwe with the Royal School of Music. It's like the highest grade you could go. Sounds like I'm really tuning my own horn, but it was a lot of practice. And so I kind of finished it, you know, and so you never really lose it after that. I think if I quit 1 or 2 years earlier, I might have lost it. But it's kind of like riding a bike now. But there's still like pieces that I used to be able to play that I would need to practice quite profusely in order to play. Um, but you know, I try to keep it up as much as I can. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I tell you, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate your time, and I know you have a few things coming up in the works. I don't know how accurate
Yeah.
IMDb is these days, but I see you have a few
Right.
irons in the fire, so that's very exciting. But I thank you, Rick, for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, you too, Brett. It's been really fun.